I don't even know where to start. Maybe that's because I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything. Maybe because it all feels like a bad dream I can't wake up from. But I guess the beginning is as good a place as any. Stephanie and I had been married for 23 years. That's a lot of years to build a life with someone. A house, 2 kids, memories wrapped up in old photo albums. Somewhere along the way, I stopped questioning whether we were happy. We just were. Or so I thought. Lately, though, things had felt off. She started working later than usual, texting with her phone tilted away from me, laughing at messages I'd never see. When I'd ask what was so funny, she'd just shrug it off, just work stuff, or a meme from one of the girls. But there were no girls' nights. At least not the way there used to be. She was always vague, always just slightly out of reach. Then there was the sudden change in how she treated me. Like I was more of a roommate than her husband. Little things like the way she used to rest her hand on my knee when we sat together, gone. The way she used to call me babe when she needed something, also gone. We weren't fighting, but we weren't us either. And then came our anniversary. She told me she had a surprise for me, something I'd never forget. A fancy dinner reservation, just the 2 of us. And for a second I felt hope. Maybe this was her way of trying to fix whatever had been broken. Maybe I was overthinking things. I even picked out a nice suit, something I hadn't done in a long time. I wanted to believe. I needed to believe. But when I got to the restaurant, she wasn't sitting alone. She was with him, my best friend, Mark. And the moment I saw them together, my stomach dropped. Stephanie didn't look nervous. She didn't look guilty. She looked satisfied, like she'd been waiting for this. She pushed a thick stack of papers across the table toward me. I barely had time to sit before she spoke. "Here are the divorce papers," she said, her voice almost cheerful. "I've moved everything we saved from our joint account into my personal account. I don't need you anymore, loser. I'm done with our marriage. He's my future. Starting with a honeymoon, I'm leaving forever with my lover. By the way, you can keep the kids." Then they laughed. Together. And they walked out. Just like that. I sat there, staring at the papers, my ears ringing. Other diners were watching, whispering, probably wondering what they had just witnessed. But I couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe. It was like my entire life had just been ripped out from under me in a single moment. And that's when I realized I wasn't going to let this slide. I had spent 23 years building a life with this woman. I had sacrificed, worked late hours to provide, stayed up with our sick kids while she slept. I had given her everything, and she thought she could just take it all and walk away? No, I wasn't just going to sit there and let them win. So I started planning. They wanted to laugh at me? Fine. But they wouldn't be laughing for long. I don't remember driving home that night. My body was on autopilot, but my mind was spinning. Every moment of our marriage, every sacrifice I made, it all felt like it had been leading to this. To Stephanie sitting across from me, casually tearing my life apart like it meant nothing. And Mark, my best friend. He'd been in my life even longer than she had. We played basketball together in college, stood by each other at our weddings. He was there when my kids were born. And all along, he'd been sneaking around behind my back. I wanted to scream, to break something. But instead, I did what I do best. I sat in silence and started thinking. Stephanie thought she had won. She thought she had everything under control. But there was one mistake she made. She underestimated me. The first thing I did was check the joint account. Sure enough, it was empty. Every penny we had saved over the years, gone. But she hadn't cleaned out my personal savings. She must have assumed I was too shocked to act quickly. Big mistake. I knew a good lawyer. Not some run-of-the-mill divorce attorney, but someone who specialized in cases where one spouse tried to pull a fast one. Within the hour, I was on the phone with him. "How fast can we freeze the remaining accounts?" I asked. "If we move quickly, by tomorrow morning." "Do it." He explained that while she had taken the joint savings, the fact that she moved it all into her personal account could work against her. Courts didn't like it when one spouse drained assets before a divorce. It was considered dissipation. If I played my cards right, I could use this against her. That was step 1. Step 2 was gathering proof. I knew they had been seeing each other for a while. I just needed confirmation. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone records. I still had access to our family plan, and within minutes I had months' worth of logs. Thousands of calls and messages exchanged between her and Mark, often late at night. The timestamps lined up perfectly with all those times she was working late or going out with friends. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. "This is good," he said. "Really good. But we'll need more." "More? Fine. I'd get more." The next day, I took a drive across town. Mark's wife, Lisa, was someone I never thought I'd have to hurt. She was kind, a great mom, and honestly, she and I had always gotten along. But now she deserved to know the truth. I pulled up outside their house and knocked on the door. Lisa answered with a confused smile, probably expecting some casual chat about weekend plans. Instead, I handed her an envelope. "I think you should see this," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were printed call logs, screenshots, and a timeline I had pieced together. Every late-night text, every phone call when Mark had claimed to be working late. I watched as her face changed, the color draining from her cheeks. This isn't real." "It is." Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages. Then something inside her broke. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and nodded. "Thank you for telling me." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. But the fire in her eyes told me one thing. Mark was about to have a really bad day. And that was only the beginning. Lisa didn't waste time. The moment she had enough proof in her hands, she turned on her heel and stormed back inside. I heard the muffled sounds of drawers being pulled open, the sharp zip of a suitcase. Mark wasn't home yet, but it was clear. By the time he walked through that door, his life would never be the same. I didn't stick around to see the fallout. I had my own plans to set in motion. Back at home, I sat at the dining table, the same one where Stephanie and I had once eaten dinner as a family. The divorce papers were still sitting in the envelope she had so arrogantly pushed across the restaurant table. I picked them up, flipping through the pages. And that's when I noticed something. Stephanie had been in such a rush to serve me my surprise that she didn't bother reading the fine print. The documents weren't finalized. They were proposed terms, meaning I hadn't signed anything. And more importantly, she had left an entire section blank where she was supposed to list our assets and shared properties. A mistake that gave me time. I called my lawyer again. "She's trying to rush this through on her terms," I told him. "I figured," he replied. "But she made an amateur mistake. She moved all the joint savings before the divorce was filed. That's going to look bad in court. So what do? We go on offense." I smiled for the first time in days. That night I barely slept. My mind was too busy running through every move I had left to make. I kept picturing Stephanie and Mark laughing at that restaurant, smug and satisfied. They thought they had pulled off the perfect plan. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The next morning, my lawyer filed an emergency motion to freeze our remaining marital assets, including Stephanie's personal account. Since she had taken everything before the divorce was filed, the court could now rule it as misappropriation. And that meant she couldn't touch a dime until things were settled. By the afternoon, I got the confirmation. Her bank account, locked. I imagined her trying to pay for her honeymoon flights, only to get declined at checkout. The thought almost made me laugh. But I wasn't done yet. The next move required patience. I had an old friend, someone in finance who specialized in asset tracing. Over the years, Stephanie and I had made a few investments together, and I wanted to make sure she hadn't hidden anything else from me. Turns out, she had. Buried deep in some shared accounts were payments she had been making for a luxury condo rental. Not for us. No, this was a secret apartment she and Mark had been using for months. And the lease was in both of their names. Which meant Mark's wife, Lisa, was entitled to that information, too. I made sure she got it. By the end of the day, my phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Lisa, you were right. He's been lying for months. But don't worry. I'm handling it." I could only imagine what handling it meant. But something told me Mark wouldn't be enjoying his luxurious side condo for much longer. Stephanie and Mark thought they were getting a clean break, riding off into the sunset together. Instead, their entire world was about to collapse. And I hadn't even played my final card yet. Stephanie called me the next morning. I let it ring. Then she called again. And again. By the fourth time, I finally picked up. I didn't say a word. Just let her sit in the silence. "What the hell did you do?" Her voice was sharp, panicked. "My bank account is frozen. I can't access anything." I leaned back in my chair, letting her words sink in. "I didn't do anything, Stephanie," I said calmly. "The court did." She sputtered, searching for a response. You went behind my back. You're trying to ruin me." I almost laughed. Trying? No, this wasn't even the half of it. "I'm just making sure things are fair," I said. "You thought you could take everything and walk away? It doesn't work like that. You're being petty. You know I need that money." "For what?" I cut her off. "Your honeymoon? Your new life with Mark." Silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. For the first time, she realized that her perfect escape plan had a crack in it. Then she made a mistake. "I'll fight this," she snapped. "I'll make sure you get nothing." "Good luck with that," I said, then hung up. She could fight all she wanted. The truth was I was already winning. Mark, on the other hand, was in worse shape. Lisa had kicked him out. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply changed the locks and left his clothes in garbage bags on the porch. Then she filed for divorce. Not just any divorce, a brutal one. With the evidence I gave her, she was in prime position to take everything. Their house, their shared assets, even part of his retirement fund. And just to twist the knife a little deeper, she filed for full custody of their kids. Mark tried calling me. Maybe he thought I'd have sympathy. Maybe he forgot he was the one who stabbed me in the back. I ignored every call. The fallout spread fast. Stephanie had burned through all our savings, thinking she'd get half of everything in the divorce. Now, she was looking at getting far less than she imagined. Mark had no home, no family, and no access to his secret love nest with Stephanie. That condo I found? Lisa forced him to sell his share just to cover the legal fees. Their new life together had started with them running out of money. But I wasn't done, because there was one last piece to this puzzle. Lisa and I met up for coffee a few days later. She looked tired, but there was a fire in her eyes, one that hadn't been there before. "I can't thank you enough," she said. "I would have never known if you hadn't told me." "We both deserved to know the truth," I said. She nodded, stirring her coffee. "So what's next for you?" she asked. I exhaled, finally letting myself breathe. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I do know one thing. I'm going to be just fine." And as I walked away, leaving the past behind me, I realized something. They thought they had destroyed me, but in the end, they only destroyed themselves. Even though I had already turned the tables on Stephanie and Mark, I wasn't satisfied just yet. They needed to feel the full weight of what they had done. Not just emotionally, but financially, socially, and legally. So I did one last thing. See, Stephanie had made a crucial mistake. She didn't just empty our joint account. She did it before the divorce was even filed. That wasn't just sneaky, it was illegal. Courts take asset dissipation very seriously, and with my lawyer's help, I made sure it was brought to the judge's attention. We filed a motion demanding that the money she took be returned immediately. Otherwise, she'd be facing legal consequences. And the best part? She didn't have the money anymore. Turns out, in her rush to start her new life, Stephanie had already spent a good chunk of the stolen savings. Luxury hotel stays, fancy dinners, deposits on travel plans. She blew through it like there was no tomorrow. But there was a tomorrow, and it hit her hard. When the judge ruled in my favor, she was forced to come up with the money. Since she didn't have it, she had to liquidate some of her assets. That meant selling jewelry, furniture, and even her car just to cover the debt. I didn't have to lift a finger. The legal system did it for me. And as for Mark, he was already drowning in his own mess. Lisa took everything in the divorce. He had no house, no savings, and no stable job since part of his income came from her family's business, which she made sure to cut him out of. So now Stephanie and Mark were left with nothing. No money, no stability, no happily ever after. Just the ruins of a plan they thought was foolproof. A few months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Lisa and I stayed in touch. We weren't rushing into anything. Both of us needed time to heal, but there was a quiet understanding between us. We had been through the same storm, and we had come out stronger. Stephanie, on the other hand, she had to move into a small apartment, far from the comfortable life she once had. And Mark? Well, he was couch surfing. Last I heard, he was working side jobs just to make ends meet. They thought they had won. They thought they could take everything from me and ride off into the sunset. Instead, they destroyed their own lives. And me? I walked away free. Not broken. Not defeated. But free. And that was the best revenge of all.